Welcome to a video tutorial of AuctionRPM. My name is Dan Zumwalt and I'll be your guide as we discuss the email processing in AuctionRPM. On the main menu of AuctionRPM, under Auctions and Marketing, you'll notice that there's an option here called Email Processing. It is in this option, if I click on it right now, that you'll find several options having to do with sending email from AuctionRPM. In order to know how to use this screen properly, we need to lay a little bit of groundwork though in order to know how this screen operates properly and how to use it to the best of its ability. I'm going to exit out of this screen, and first let's take a look at Auctions, Preparation, and then Schedule an Auction. In Schedule an Auction, I'll highlight the new sample auction, I'll edit that record, and then I'm going to go to the Marketing tab. Here on the Marketing tab, you'll notice on the left-hand side a section where it lists auction categories. Now this is an area where you can identify the categories of inventory that are going to be sold at this particular auction. Here you have your add and delete button, where if I hit add right now, it would list out all of the categories that are currently in the system, and if I choose clothes, then that's added. Hit add again and click on electronics, and so now, as you can see, I can add the different categories that are going to be sold at this auction. If this auction is a pre-lotted auction and I've already entered in all of the inventory into the system, I could use the auto select button, and that would scan all inventory that has been pre-lotted into this auction. It would come up with a unique list of categories that represent that inventory, and it would put those categories here. Now put this in your mind and back of your mind for just a moment, and I'm going to go ahead and hit done here and answer yes to save changes. And now I'll exit out of this screen and we'll go to Tools, Master Data, and then I'm going to click on Buyers. Now for, let's say, Joe Buyer here, I'm going to edit this record and go straight to the Purchasing tab. Now you'll notice on the Purchasing tab for Joe Buyer, there's also an area where you can enter in the inventory categories. Now these inventory categories, because this is a buyer record for Joe Buyer, these inventory categories are categories of inventory that Joe Buyer is specifically interested in. Now, why would we do this? Create categories on the individual buyer records and also put in categories on the auction? It's because in an area like the email processing in AuctionRPM, again that's found under Auctions and Marketing, the email processing area allows us to send an email to specific buyers based upon the inventory categories that they have said that they're interested in. So, for instance, earlier we indicated that that particular auction is an auction where we're going to be selling clothes. Well, if that auction is where we're selling clothes, and if we have, let's say, out of the 4 buyers, sample buyers that are in the system, 2 of those buyers indicated that they're interested in clothes, then what happens is it will cross-reference that auction with your entire buyer list, which of course would be thousands of buyers after a little while, and it would look for all buyers that have said they're interested in the same categories that we're selling at that auction. It would cross-reference it and come up with a hybrid list of people that would be uniquely interested in this particular auction. And having done that, then we can use this upper section here on the email processing screen in order to first indicate which auction we want to work on, and then we could use these 2 buttons in order to send an email to all buyers that would be interested in this specific auction. Now notice that these 2 buttons say that we can send just a general notice, or we can send a notice with a catalog. Now this catalog that is sent here is just a simple listing of the lot numbers and associated descriptions for those lot numbers. This notice that is being discussed here is set inside of the Settings and Defaults system in AuctionRPM. If I go to Tools and Settings and Defaults and look under Web Settings, you'll notice, no, not Web Settings, actually let's take a look at Email Settings. You'll notice that down here is an email body. This is that general notice that would be sent by that email screen that we were just looking at. While we're here, let's also take notice of this right here. Up here in the top part of the email settings screen in Settings and Defaults, You have the SMT outgoing server settings, as well as the sender email address, username, and password. Now these parameters are absolutely necessary in order for AuctionRPM to be able to send an email. These settings are the identical settings that would be entered in to the corresponding screen in an email program such as Microsoft Outlook. Whatever email service that you're using, that you would contact them and ask them what are the settings that would normally be entered into Microsoft Outlook in order for Outlook to be used with their email services. They would give you those settings, and those settings would correspond to these fields that are right here, including this checkbox here indicating whether or not the server requires a secure connection. I'll exit out of this screen, and let's return back to auctions, marketing, email processing. So we've discussed the selecting of an auction and these two buttons here. You'll notice that this button here just says send catalog to all buyers. As you can see, these two buyers here are indicating that they are allowing you to send the catalog to only buyers interested in the selected auction, whereas this button here just simply sends a catalog to all buyers. It's very important to note about this screen the placement of these lines. For instance, this section here is entitled Auction Specific Emailing, and these lines indicate that everything within this box here are all options having to do with auction specific emailing, whereas this bottom section is just called general email, and again there's lines here indicating what kind of email is sent under general email. If we look at general email, there's two different areas that can be done, two different ways that general email can be sent. First of all, under categorized selection, we can simply send an email to all buyers, or we can send an email to all consigners. Conversely, we could click on this checkbox here, and this would allow us to send a specific buyer or consigner an email. Which buyer or consigner? Well, we could just directly type in a name and address here, or we can use these auto locator buttons, like I'll click on buyers here and I'll select Joe Buyer here. If I hit select, then it would look up not only his name but his email address that we've entered into the buyer master. So in this case of general email, what does it send? Well, this is what it sends. Over here on the right hand side you have the subject and the body that would actually be sent in this particular email. I'll go ahead and exit out of here, and let's take a look at one other thing here. If we go back to auctions and preparation, I'm going to go back to schedule an auction and editing our new sample auction here. If we go into marketing here, there's a couple other options that are important to note. Once an auction has been completed, and once you have not only the inventory in there and you have winning bids, notice that there are three buttons here that you might want to consider. Assuming that you have categories listed here, you could use these buttons in order to help you and assist you in maintaining the categories of inventory that are posted to each individual buyer. For instance, here we have post categories to all registered bidders. And what this button does is it takes whatever categories are listed here and posts them to anybody that actually registered at this auction. Secondly, we could use this button. We could use post categories to all purchasing bidders. In other words, it wouldn't just send these categories or post these categories to the buyer records for everybody that's registered, but rather it would post these categories to only those that actually made a purchase at this particular auction. Then finally, we have here post-purchased categories to winning bidders. This is probably the most commonly used one down here. What this does is this goes through and looks at the actual purchases that the buyers made at this auction. It would look at the categories of inventory that they purchased and would post those categories to the buyer master record. One other thing to note too is that if we go to Tools, Master Data, and we're going to look back at the buyer record here, you'll notice that of course we've already talked about the inventory categories here on the right hand side, But if we go to the Details tab for this buyer, there's a checkbox here that directly affects your email sending, and that is the disallow broadcast emails. Let's suppose that Joe Buyer indicated that they no longer wish to receive emails from you. Well, it's important that you honor that request, and to do so, you would simply place a check mark here for Joe Buyer, and that would mean that any future broadcast emails that you would send out, that it would omit Joe as one of the recipients of that email. I'll go ahead and hit done here and answer yes to save changes. We'll exit out to the main menu, and that'll conclude this discussion of the email processing in AuctionRPM. If you have any questions or comments about this video or any other videos that are found on the AuctionRPM.com website, please feel free to give us a call. Our phone number is area code 209-588-1232. Thanks for listening.